Good afternoon, everyone. I will officially call this meeting to order. Diane, please call the roll.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Clancy?
Here.
Councilmember Gray?
I am present. Thank you.
Councilmember Days?
Here.
Okay.
Sorry.
Councilmember Dunaway? And Councilmember Dunaway. Councilmember Fitch?
Here.
Councilmember Tracus? Councilmember Harder?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you. The committee takes official notice of and admits into evidence all St. Louis County ordinances and resolutions. We are here today to receive and to hear about our annual report from the Older Adult Commission of St. Louis County, Missouri. And I, at this point, will turn it over to Chairwoman Elizabeth De La Perouse from the Older Adults Commission to share with us an update on their annual report. Liz, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Chairwoman Clancy and St. Louis County Commission for giving us this time to present our 2019 report and goals for 2020. We know how busy you are, and we really appreciate you giving us this time. First, I would like to thank you and County Executive Dr. Sam Page for appointing and confirming 3 commissioners who had been actively participating in commission meetings but who had not yet been appointed and confirmed, and also reappointing and confirming the rest of us serving on expired terms. At this time, we have only 2 vacancies, District 4 and District 6. We hope to have those filled at some point. At this time, I would like, if possible, for each member of the St. Louis County Older Adult Commission to introduce themselves. Carol Rodriguez, could you start? Carol is a vice chair.
Sure. My name is Carol Rodriguez, and I am honored to have the privilege of serving on the commission. I am somewhat recently retired. My entire career was working in services, working with older adults. Most recently, 25 years with the Alzheimer's Association, where I was Senior Vice President of Governmental Affairs and Advocacy. So thank you for having us today.
Thank you, Carol. Zulema, you on? Is Zulema there? I guess Zulema maybe is not on the call. Zulema has been with the commission from the beginning, and she is retired from UMSL biology and is a very helpful member of our commission. Is Deborah on?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Deborah Grandison, recently commissioned to the Older Adult Commission. I am excited about that. I serve as a health advocate throughout the St. Louis community and also nationally now. Was appointed as one of the 2019 Go Red for Women national spokespersons. So I speak on health. I'm a survivor of both heart disease and diabetes. So I have a very a large interest in advocating for seniors as well as other people. I also did a lot of things through the Missouri Arts Council, who actually came to the commission to talk about how arts can impact our seniors. And so I do a lot of things. I'm kind of a teaching artist / poet, writer, doing some things in the community for seniors. So I'm really glad to be a part of this wonderful commission and hope to just, pair up with all of these other amazing individuals and see what we can bring forth for seniors.
Thank you, Deborah. Dan? Now we
Okay. Thank you. I'm Dan Rosenthal, the commissioner representing District 5. I've been participating in the commission for about 2 years. About half of that time as a commissioner in waiting, I guess. I have been practicing architecture for about 37 years.
Hard to understand, Dan.
In senior. I'm so sorry. I am an architect specializing in senior housing, and I've been practicing for about 37 years.
Thank you, Dan. Helen Castile? There you go.
There we go. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Council, for having us at this time. I've been volunteering with the Commission, going back to Aging Ahead and the task force prior to that for 5 years. I am a retired teacher and former board member of the Parkway School District. I have thoroughly enjoyed meeting with the Commission and being with the people and all the work that we're doing on behalf of older adults. So thank you, other members of the Commission, and once again, thank you, Council members, for having us today.
Lisa Knoll?
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Knoll, and I am the Chief Executive Officer, of Aging Ahead. So we are one of 10 area agencies on aging in the state of Missouri. We're actually the largest, and we cover St. Louis County, Jefferson, St. Charles, and Franklin County. I've been with the agency for 15 years. Previously, as Chief Operating Officer, just the last 2 years, I succeeded Mary Schaefer. So I am very excited. I'm one of the newer members of the committee, and I am very excited to be part of the group and to participate and see what we can, bring to the table as an area agency on aging. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think Wayne is not, am I on that? And then Lisa Hotley, who was our prior chair, is unavailable to meet today. So maybe last, Susan, do you want to introduce yourself?
I don't need introduction because I'm just the staff liaison, so.
Still very important. Okay, thank you all. So as I stated in my introductory letter to the 2019 report, connecting to and working with the Multidisciplinary Task Force, short named MDT, on elder abuse and exploitation was a focus of the Commission in 2019. Realizing that the St. Louis County Prosecutor's Office had historically not recognized this problem, an email was sent to County Executive Dr. Sam Page. This was forwarded to Prosecutor Wesley Bell's office. A meeting with Prosecutor Sam Olton took place on July 2nd, 2019, and a prosecutor was assigned to focus on elder abuse and exploitation. The November Older Adult Commission meeting was a presentation on elder abuse and exploitation given by Missouri Prosecutor Catherine Vanier. In attendance were members of the Prosecutor Bell's office, as well as several from Adult Health and Family Services. We are now working on educating St. Louis County municipalities on how widespread and complicated cases of elder abuse and exploitation are and why they need to be a priority. We had hoped to have an event in May for St. Louis County municipalities, but had to cancel due to COVID-19. We were able to send a flyer to all the municipalities on COVID-19 and how to find services. The MDT on elder abuse and exploitation, this is a bigger event in June. That event was also canceled, and instead there have been a series of webinars that have been 2 so far, and the webinar last week had 99 participants. And the webinar this Friday has already God, 125 people signed up. The participants represent older adult service providers, law enforcement, financial service, prosecuting attorneys. Older adult abuse has mandatory reporting, and it is well known that many cases are not recognized and therefore not reported. This is a growing problem nationwide. Since yesterday was World Older Adult Abuse Awareness Day, the MDT very much appreciated the St. Louis County proclamation declaring June 15th, 2020 as World Older Adult Abuse Awareness Day. Earlier this year, legislation had been proposed to recognize the need for MDT in these difficult cases. The Older Adult Commission was initially in support of this legislation, but the wording was changed to provide an exclusion for residential facilities. That is unacceptable. The sponsors were contacted and the MDT wording was removed. We hope to work with the nursing home industry to come up with a compromise that allows the multidisciplinary task force oversight to include residential facilities. The census is also a focus for the Older Adult Commission. We are doing what we can to support the census. When the pandemic hit, it was clear that the impact would be greater on older residents of St. Louis County. Commission member Lisa Knoll, who you just met, reported that Aging Ahead had in place an emergency plan that was activated. Details are best given by Lisa, but all older adults who needed food and later toiletries were able to get what they needed. March 16th, Lisa Knoll was contacted by Jason Purnell, who had been hired to head the regional response team coordinating COVID-related calls, providers, emergency services for the St. Louis County Health Department. Jason has done a great job. And again, Lisa reported that all older adults who called with a need had their need met. I also want to thank Susan Schaefer for serving county older residents and our contact St. Louis County government. She's been invaluable to this commission. The only need that we wish could be better addressed is legal, help with wills, power of attorney, etc. We hope this service can be offered in the future. Finally, normally the commission does not meet during the months of July and August, but we voted to meet this year because of the ongoing crisis and the census. Thank you again for your time. And now, please, if you have any questions, we're happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Liz. Any comments or questions from any council members?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Councilman Harder.
Yes, Liz, you mentioned multiple cases of elder abuse. I don't have a copy of your report. Could you tell us how many happened in the last year in St. Louis County?
I'm afraid I cannot. All I do know is that prior to meeting with Wesley Bell's office, as is often the case, St. Louis County is not unusual in this. Like child abuse, elder abuse is often the victim is dependent upon the individual, many times a family member. So they're very complicated and difficult to identify, and that's why the multidisciplinary task force is so important. I do know that when Catherine presented in November, the prosecutor Bell's office asked to speak to her afterwards about a case he was working on. So they are working on cases. But under the previous prosecutor, I think they were, many cases of exploitation tended to be viewed as family matters, and so therefore not something that the prosecutor's office was interested in.
So there's not a code or a tracking mechanism to know if you're making a dent into this issue or not?
As actually the adult services, they do tend to get these calls. They do have the numbers. I do not have those. So they know how many calls they get claiming some sort of situation where an older adult, and Catherine Vanier used a lot of examples, and I was sitting at a table in Brentwood at a kind of a town hall meeting, and a local police officer said that she was being called constantly to a neighborhood where a grandmother had allowed their grandchild to move in with them, and the grandchild was dealing drugs from the house, and the police officer said they just didn't know what to do about this. So those are the kind of cases that come up, and I think sometimes it was a matter of just making sure that law enforcement contacted Adult Protective Services in those cases.
Thank you. Also, do you track abuse through, if you would call it abuse, of either identity theft or scams against seniors in our community, and is that tracked at all? And is there a plan for that?
There is, and we're doing quite a lot of work on helping to, OASIS in particular is doing a lot of courses to help seniors recognize when they maybe are being duped into doing something. The financial services offices are also very involved. They're the ones that tend to notice if there's an unusual transaction on someone's in someone's account, and then they can flag it.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Councilwoman Days.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your report. I guess I need to move a little closer to where we are now dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic and the proliferation of the disease with nursing homes, assisted living facilities, things like that. What is happening, or what are you seeing, and how is that reported to you? The kinds of things that are happening with our seniors, since we are mostly adversely affected to this.
You know, let me turn this over to Dan Rosenthal. He's our he knows more about, is more plugged into the residential facilities. Dan, would you mind responding?
I'm happy to. So there are, I deal with more of the facilities side of the problem, and the operators of facilities are dealing more with the operational side of the problem. And I'm seeing a lot of, really good strategies amongst senior living facilities in implementing quarantines and implementing certain strategies to protect their residents in all levels of care. And I know, as we all know, this pandemic snuck up on the industry as it did the rest of the country. And unfortunately, the population most at risk in skilled nursing facilities were the ones that were hit the hardest. I'm seeing in independent living apartments, which are still those people that are living, with on their own, with the ability to still cook for themselves and tend to themselves, are still, dealing with certain issues that we're all dealing with, which is especially the the social engagement piece, where in all levels of care, we all know that individuals, especially the elderly who are not necessarily technologically proficient, are most likely to be isolated. And we know that isolation is an enormous health risk to the elderly, because with isolation comes depression and comes a lot of stressful behaviors, such as poor eating, poor sleeping, etc., and puts people at risk. I think Lisa Knoll can address some of the operational side. I can address some of the facilities side. The industry, the senior living industry, is responding to this problem in developing strategies to how to change the physical building. So, we know that one of the biggest problems is the mechanical system, heating, ventilating, air conditioning issues. We know that that many coronaviruses can be, transmitted through the air. And if we have an air handling system that is blowing air horizontally through a large room, we've probably all seen some of the studies where people in a restaurant where the air is blowing from this side of the room across many, many tables. It has been shown that many of the people sitting downwind have contracted the disease. And so there are mechanical systems that provide air from above and return from below. When the air is moving vertically rather than horizontally, those droplets tend to be drawn down into the return air system, and they don't travel from person to person. We're also seeing some technological devices being used more on the systems themselves. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this, but there are certain types of filtration systems that are doing a very good job at ionizing the particles that carry coronavirus to change their content so that they are not transmittable.
One of the things.
Go on. Just mention one other item, which is in skilled nursing and in assisted living and memory care. Probably one of the greatest strategies we have is how we separate people within the building. There are certain types of designs where you can have 8 to 10 residents within a smaller neighborhood, where they have dining facilities and cooking facilities within their neighborhood. And if somebody does contract the disease, they can quarantine just that individual neighborhood. And they tend to have a universal worker concept where one individual is responsible for attending to those 8 people. So it's a much easier situation to control rather than what we see in larger skilled nursing, where you have a large staff and you have everybody mixing with other people in common areas.
Well, as we
go on.
Yes, thank you. As we're looking at funding, or not necessarily funding, but resources that we can deliver to various aspects of the community, and we certainly want to keep this in the forefront with what it is that we can or cannot do. And so I am hopeful that they will. Someone from the team will contact you to see if there's anything additionally we can do. I know we provided PPE and things like that, but is there anything additionally that we can do within reason to assist this population? So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Rita. I have to, one of the things is that when Dan was talking about all the various changes that need to be done, I think that's going to be where some of the facilities that serve the underserved are probably not going to have the funds available to make those changes. So that might be something that if there are funds for providing, extra filters for circulation of air or something of that nature, could be helpful. Lisa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I actually would. Thank you. So I want to give a shout out, if I could, to Voice. Voice is an organization in our region that is the long-term care ombudsman program. And every area agency on aging is required. We get extra federal funding to contract with these ombudsman programs. And so the biggest part of what they do is send volunteers into facilities, work with staff, families, residents to address issues of isolation and other things that are going on within long-term care facilities. And they have not been able to do that for the last several months. However, they've been working really hard to do their work telephonically. And speaking of funding, one of the things that they are trying to do, as Dan said, technology is huge, and they are trying to integrate technology into their work so that when they are not able to make those visits because of whatever the situation is, and right now it's the pandemic, that they will be able to have their volunteers do that outreach that is so critical via technology. So we did get some extra federal funding, and that we will pass along to them, and they are in the process of putting that in place right now. However, I think it's a drop in the bucket, to be honest. And when we talk about isolation and abuse and neglect, these things like technology and some of that frontline work that those folks are doing is really, really critical. So it's VOICE, VOYCE.
Oh, VOY. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we make sure in our outreach and as a commission that people know about these resources, because we don't want any of this to be a well-kept secret. We want people to know that these are federally and state funded programs that everybody has access to, regardless of what facility you're in, what level of care, you have access to those things.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Liz, this is Carol. I just wanted to add one thing, and that is staying in nursing homes. I think there was a real problem with being able to get tests initially. However, that seems to be changing. There was also a real delay in reporting of cases. I believe nursing homes had 4 or 5 days in which they were to report. And now the Department of Health and Senior Services has changed that. They must report every case within 24 hours. And there is a strong push by the department now to test building-wide. So test everybody in the building, including residents and employees, because that's a real problem. I mean, you have a lot of individuals. Unfortunately, this is an industry where the direct care workers are not paid very much, which we're all aware of. And so they may work at facility A for 20 hours, and then they may go down the street and work at facility B for 10 hours to get enough hours to be able to put food on the table, etc. And as a result of that, I think we're seeing people bringing some of that COVID into the building. Additionally, if they work with one individual with COVID and maybe we're not taking all the precautions that they should have, but they're caring for 10 or 12 residents during the course of their day, it's also creating additional problems. So that's why we're seeing facility that'll have one case one week and it'll have 20 cases the next, which is really horrific. So at the state level, I think they were very slow to ramp up. That's my humble opinion. But I think they have taken the whole testing issue very, very seriously and are pushing hard for facilities to do building-wide testing, which I think is exactly what they need to be doing, because that way they can isolate individuals more quickly and address the problem.
Madam Chair. Question.
I think I heard Councilwoman Gray, and then Councilman Fitch, you can go after her. Councilwoman Gray?
Yes, I was, with regards to testing, are they going to test employees more often or both? employees and patients?
It's my understanding.
I mean, not more often, but more widespread.
Well, it's a very good question. My understanding is that they are pushing for what they call building-wide testing. So that means we need to be testing employees and we need to be testing residents.
And the other question comment, we've been told that a lot of employees at some of these facilities are not getting enough masks and they have to wear the same mask repeatedly. Has that changed since the implementation of STL cares?
That I don't feel comfortable being able to answer one way or the other. It's my understanding that the protective equipment is better. I think things are ramping up in terms of trying to address this problem in long-term care. But it is June.
I guess the question is, are you getting additional PPE?
Yeah, I don't know.
But the facilities.
Exactly. Let me see what I can find out, and I'll get back with you.
Okay, but
I don't know for sure.
Have you,
Lisa, would you have any information on that, Lisa Knoll?
I don't have specific information about the PPE, no.
Well, have you gotten complaints from workers or families that the CNAs and nurses have to are either not wearing masks or being required to wear them over and over again? Have you heard anything?
We've heard stories about that, but since none of us are really directly in there,
right?
Unfortunately, we
Just
don't
can't substantiate.
So I'm sorry, but we will
Okay.
look into that and get back to you.
Okay, because that came up before.
Absolutely.
A meeting I was on. Okay, I'll hold my other question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll get back with you.
Fitch?
Thank you, Chairwoman. My question's for Carol, and maybe you can answer this or maybe not. Regarding the testing in these long-term care facilities that you were talking about, I've been trying to get the CARES team interested in funding some of the costs for the testing in those, and I've heard that they've received federal reimbursement for the cost of those tests. However, the CEO of Bethesda responded and said some reimbursement, but nowhere near what our costs are. And many of these facilities are nonprofits. Are you familiar with the funding situation for those tests?
I am not. I mean, anecdotally, I have also heard that it is being covered, but certainly if you're hearing from Bethesda that it isn't adequate, then I would think it possibly isn't adequate. Because one of the situations, first of all, if you're doing building-wide testing, that's a lot of tests. Right. Because you really should be, if it's building-wide, you're doing people who are working in dietary and who are working in housekeeping, etc. So that's a lot of tests you're doing. Also, I think we have to recognize this has to be repeated. You know, what do you do if 3 weeks later you have someone test positive? Then do you need to test building wide again? So I don't know about the cost, but I can see if I can inquire with Department of Health and see if there are concerns in that area.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is for Liz. Last year we heard from Lisa Haughtley, I know who is my council rep, couldn't join us today, about funding for your group. Do you have funding needs and that aren't being met, and what would those be?
Well, thank you very much. Yes, we would love to have funding. I think if we had funds, because we are now just a volunteer, it would be great to have even an intern. Technical support is something that we have struggled with as a group, because we do everything on our own. So yeah, it would be lovely to have some sort of help to get information. Right now, this is everything that we do on our own time. And I'm sure we could do more if we had some assistance.
Have you all ever put together a proposal, like a specific budget and what the dollar amount would be?
No, we have not. We have not.
That would be something I'd be interested in seeing, if that's something you think as a group you could get together and say, here's what our needs are and here's what the costs are. And obviously we'd like to know if it's going to be related, any relationship whatsoever, to the COVID-19 situation. Because those are all reimbursable
Well,
costs.
yes, and I think, well, thank you. Well, I do think that one of the things that was news to me back to the nursing home is that they were all supposed to have a pandemic emergency response. And it seems from just the few inquiries I made towards, what checks out what when it comes to the nursing homes. And really the only oversight or review was for fire and a tornado, that kind of an emergency. Most of the nursing homes, from what I understand, did not have in place a pandemic or a major flu or a major health issue. So that's certainly something that was probably in part caused by a lack of funding for those that go in and check on these facilities to make sure that they have all they need. It's not the elder population is a very vulnerable population. That's just the way it is. But thank you.
Okay, and a follow-up one, my last question is you mentioned about legal services, preparation for wills and things like that you don't have that service available. You used to have that service available, or at least Department of Human Services had that service available. And what happened? Wasn't the Missouri Bar involved in that with volunteers? Did that fall apart, or whatever happened with that?
I think it was one of these things, and Susan would know this more, but I believe that we were told that it was they just didn't have the manpower to be able to continue with that service. So we have discussed in the commission seeing if there isn't one of the law schools that would be willing to help with that particular service. Recently, I know it was brought up that the need to notarize the ballots is a concern because, again, older adults are often not as able to go and find a notary. But then I also heard that there's going to be a big effort to train people to be notaries so that those services are more available. But yes, it's a issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question? Or I'm next in line?
Yeah, unless there is a council member who hasn't had a chance yet. I don't think there is. So Councilwoman.
If I may, I just want to revert real quick back to the abuse, older adult abuse. The website health.mo.gov has given an awful lot of information, questions, and answers, and that would be a good website. And if anyone is listening on the phone, it's for the purposes also for you that are listening. There is a phone number for elder abuse and reporting, and it tells what you can and cannot do. And the number for elder abuse is 800-392-0210. And I just wanted to make sure that that information got out.
Thank you. Councilwoman Days. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Have you considered contacting either UMSL or WashU or St. Louis University, one of the social services, social work departments, trying to get some maybe interns to assist you with needs? Have you ever considered that, or did that work or not work, or you've done it before and whatever?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. Yes, we have thought about that. I know Susan Schaefer's has talked about how she likes to get the interns from UMSL, and I actually am on the Arts and Sciences Council up at UMSL, and I wanted to talk to Dean Kirsten about whether there wasn't some other things where they could assist. So yes, we think that's a great idea.
Okay, thank you. The other question, and you're mentioning that there was not policies in place for, I guess, your emergencies. You said tornadoes and things like that, but nothing for pandemics. I think I heard you correctly. Now, is that a function of the state? Do they regulate that, or is that a county function?
You know what? I think that is actually a statewide and countywide. I mean, it's just that every residential care facility is supposed to have a fire emergency, protocol in place. But apparently there was also a directive saying there needed to be protocol for a pandemic, epidemic, or a bad flu.
Mm-hmm.
And it just wasn't followed up on, from what I can gather.
Okay.
I think it is happening now, but who responsibility that is.
All right. And the last question had to do with while we're looking at testing for, our facilities, do we have, for instance, coming into the county, you have to have your temperature checked, that kind of thing going into various facilities. Do you know if that's common practice now or not?
I do not know if that's common practice. I think that's done in a case, in a business by business matter. I don't think it's any sort of regular plan. Am I wrong? Is there anyone else who knows more about that?
Liz,
I do know that in independent living, they are not necessarily testing people or taking temperatures as people enter the building. The policy has been more to just limit visitors entirely and to essential caregivers only. But in the healthcare, the licensed healthcare sector, you are seeing more of the temperature taking.
Okay. All right. And my last question or comment, I'm not sure, but I thought I read that the when you're discussing your abuse, that the legislature just passed a bill allowing cameras or things like that inside facilities to kind of monitor the abuse, at least in the nursing homes or facilities. Are you aware of that, or is that true? Or
yes, I read the same thing. That was not something that we were, directly involved with, but it's certainly a good to have those cameras. And I know that one of the things that we were discussing was, again, from a funding standpoint, if we could get phones into particularly the facilities for the lower income residents, that would enable their family to do FaceTime and that kind of thing with them. All of that can give an extra pair of eyes on that individual and will help see if they are okay or not. So those are things we've been discussing.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Liz. What are the commission's goals for the next year, and how can the council help you?
Thank you so much. The real goals for the next year is to continue to work with the multidisciplinary task force on that. I think it's to the census is a big issue for us. We want to just make sure that the word gets out. There is concern with the isolated older adults that we may miss people There's a lot of fear amongst some of the older adults about people coming randomly to their door, not just because they don't know who they are, but also now because they may be bringing with them this potential virus. So that's kind of what we're looking at, trying to think. Any of my other fellow commissioners, what am I leaving out as far as a major focus for 2020?
I will jump in for a second. We did have discussions in our meetings about doing a better job disseminating the information from the Age-Friendly Communities Toolkit to the various municipalities, and that was one of the things that an intern could help us with. We did have conversations with someone at the Brown School at Washington University about getting on their list for internships as well earlier this year. But we've also had conversations about, the concerns of providing housing for the elderly. We know that there are programs that provide for housing if you meet a certain criteria related to household income. But what we know in the industry is that there are, the people who qualify for subsidized housing, for the most part, can find subsidized housing, or there is subsidized housing that exists. There's obviously housing for people who can afford market rate apartments. The problem is that the majority of the elderly in this country are not at both ends of the spectrum. They're in the middle, and those people are not being well served because they don't have the savings to support themselves in retirement, and there really, frankly, is not good senior housing for people of middle income. Yep. And so we'd love to figure out a way or help in some way to help bridge that gap.
Thank you.
It's a good point.
Yeah. I think, Lisa, that's really one of the things that we're seeing is that the underserved often have churches and various groups that help them, and then the well-off are usually in pretty good shape. They are often at high risk for exploitation and abuse, but it's that middle that Dan keeps talking about, who really kind of fall through the cracks and are very, very difficult to help.
Thank you for bringing up that point. Unless there are any further comments or questions from the council, Councilwoman Gray?
Yes. I actually got an email from one of my associations, and they were asking about assistance with technology. That's the word they use, and I don't know specifically what they're looking for their seniors. Is there anything available? I know you mentioned that was discussed earlier. Anything available for seniors? I know the students.
Well, as a matter of fact, that actually came up, and that it was brought to my attention that the Department of Revenue did not have an ability other than through technology to contact them for licenses or whatever. And fortunately, I was given the name of the head of revenue, and a telephone number was quickly put up because it is a big issue for older people, especially now. Before, they used to be able to go to the libraries. Many of the libraries in community centers had computers available for seniors to use. So that has been a big challenge with COVID. And I don't think we found a solution yet. But can't really, I guess, have your association contact, either St. Louis County, and we'll see what we can do to figure out what their specific needs are.
Okay, the word they use is staying connected. It says they need something to help them stay connected through technology, but that's still not a big help. So I
I think that's probably getting them anything from a cell phone to some sort of a device that they can then communicate with family members through FaceTime or, but then they have to have Wi-Fi, and in many cases, that's not reliable or available. So it's something that we're behind on.
Okay, that's what I
I
was
think
looking
Oasis
also.
is, doesn't Oasis have programs to help people with technology, just this sort of technology?
They do, Dan, but they wouldn't have the ability to provide those devices to individuals that don't have them.
If I could just jump in and just add that this is really a front burner issue for a lot of providers in the region. I heard somebody say the other day that technology is the new toilet paper. And so it's on everybody's mind, and we are collectively looking at grants that we can, collaboratively get access for folks so that we address that isolation. So if they can't get to a virtual class, whether it's Oasis, library, or whatnot, then we want them to be able to do that. So we're looking at ways that we can hook people up. So, but it's going to take funds, and there is actually some funding sources out there. So it's just a question of connecting all the dots. And so we are working on that. It's a big deal.
Okay, and I'm trying to read
Thanks, Lisa.
So they mentioned tablets. They need tablets. That's one of the things. Access to programs. And trying to because they're isolated. So again, like you said, they want something to keep them in touch with, like you said, their family, or like you said, maybe they don't have Wi-Fi or or internet, not internet, cable and internet.
Right.
I think that's all the things they're saying, because they did mention the word isolated. And see, that's another barrier. Technology is another barrier keeping them isolated during the pandemic. So I guess that's what they meant.
Yes.
But I will definitely have them contact you. Is there a number or email they can use?
Probably contact CORE at St. Louis County Government.
Cora?
I hope I'm not speaking for.
Did you say contact Cora?
Or Aging Ahead. CORE, yes.
So
okay, thank you.
We are about to hit the 1 hour mark, and so I want to let everyone know that, because the council does have another hearing that is supposed to start shortly. So, getting some feedback. We have no public comments for today, so unless there are any last minute burning questions, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. I want to thank the Older Adults Commission for the work that you all are doing, the very important work you all are doing, and for taking the time to submit such a robust annual report to us and talking with us about it this afternoon. So thank you. I heard a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.